So what's happening, wrestling fans? Welcome back to the Intermat Wrestling Podcast, and we are a quad pod again this week. Austin and Kevin are back, joining myself and Robbie, who held down the fort last week. Good to have you gentlemen back.
You're
Hopefully,
welcome.
hopefully you're over the
Thank you.
sickness and the little vacation blues, I guess, that you guys were having last week. But we had some wrestling. We got into some pretty good conversations last week, and something that we're going to continue to talk about today that we talked about last week, now that we have more details, is one, I want to get your guys' take on D1 and D2 and D3 women's wrestling coming into play. That'll be one of our topics today. And then we also have national duels that we'll discuss, along with the controversial celebration, what we're looking forward to. And then a topic that was on Bo Nickal's podcast that him and Carter Starocci talked about is wrestling better today, or was it better back in the day? So first, let's start with national duels. It was announced today that it's going to be coming back and going to be in Tulsa. David Taylor has been very strategic with the things that he's been doing while in Stillwater. A lot of promotion. I mean, they had a blackout where they wore black singlets last week against West Virginia. And then also him tweeting a couple of weeks ago to kind of get buzz going of we need to bring national duels back, which obviously, as we know now, was already in the works of them bringing it back. And now we have it. And there's going to be money on the line, as Robbie and I talked about last week. There should be money on the line. There should be all these different things that we discussed. Looks like they were already putting them into motion. So let's, bring Austin and Kev into the conversation. Guys, what are your thoughts now that we have all the details on national duels, and how do you feel about the setup that was announced today of how it's going to look?
I love the idea. I think it's a start in the right direction. People putting money down, if that's what we got to do to get a lot of these good top teams together for this type of event, good. But elephant in the room, Penn State and Iowa have not committed, and I'm pretty sure they said they're not going to come to this. You're the two top teams in the country not wanting to go is a little odd to me. I don't know the reason behind that. I'm sure they have their reasons, but it'd be nice to get all the teams on board to see who a true dual meet championship team would be and what that event would look like.
I mean, first of all, his magic is endless. He tweets and then it happens the next day. I don't think this was a setup ahead of time. I think he just did it on his own with his
Out
magical
of thin
powers.
air.
Yeah, just created it with a tweet. It's magic. No, I mean, so I agree in spirit that like Penn State, Iowa, right? Let's hypothetical whatever number one and number two and top however many teams in the country are always going to be there. I would love that. It wasn't always the case back when, like, I loved it back when they had it. I used to watch Central Michigan was wrestling in it when we were, one of the top 20 teams in the country pretty regularly. And I remember Minnesota used to always kick our butts, and they won it a bunch of different times.
Mhm.
And I don't think that any of those years they were technically like ranked the number one team in the country. I think at the time they were probably top two or three. Um, but I mean, those were awesome. And I've talked to endless guys who competed in those events back in the day, just kind of, hey, remember when this happened and how awesome that was? And they always have great stories to tell, and they loved competing in it. And there was no money on the line. It was just for the championship, or that idea of them being the champions, because they showed up to the tournament to compete in it. Um, so in general, yeah, I'm super, super excited. I'm super excited to see it again. These guys are going to show up and compete hard for whatever championship. It could be the Kevin Claunch novice tournament champions, and whatever B1 guys show up, like they're going to try to win it, right?
I'd
So
sponsor Matt for that.
yeah, there we go. It's not a $200,000 trophy, I can promise you that, but uh,
$200.
yeah, $200. That's what you get. Um, so but it's going to be awesome, man. We're creating another event that's supposed to be early in the season and get people to show up and compete. Those coaches are going to get after it. I love that there's money involved for the teams competing and what they can do to help raise money for their program and their coaches and scholarships. I don't know how that's going to be divvied up or whatever, but I just love that this is happening. We've been talking about it, I feel like, here or elsewhere for years. And to know that there's some buy-in from big programs and Oklahoma State in particular, I think it should be emphasized how, I mean, this isn't the only thing that they're going in on, man. They were, getting recruits. We've talked about that. They're completely bought in, it sounds like, on what they're doing. Obviously, just getting David Taylor to begin with. So knowing that they're going to be invested in it, knowing that that's going to, probably draw some more recruits too. So I'm just excited, man. And the buy-in from, a big program like Oklahoma State and anybody else who wants to compete in it is going to be really, really good for that whole event.
I mean, the backer for the tournament is effectively the same guy who's, you know, wholly responsible for the funding that got Taylor to Oklahoma State and has done so much in such a short amount of time. And I think, that the idea of it's great. The idea that every team's going to get, 20K to show up probably could be a little higher because that's effectively not even offsetting the cost of travel for most of these teams. So great that it's offsetting some of it so it doesn't eat into the budget and with the opportunity to win more. But I don't know. The thing that's kind of bounced back and forth in some of the different groups group chats that I'm in is, what's this invitational going to look like? What teams are realistically going to be there and get invites? Are we going to see the top tier mid-major teams or small conference teams? What's it going to look like? So, I mean, we need more details. Clearly, we just got the release this morning, so we don't know a lot yet. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it shapes up and what direction they go, especially the first year with the teams that they invite, because that's going to kind of set the tone for what it would look like moving forward.
Yeah. I think first of all, I love it. And I love everything. I love the energy that David Taylor is bringing into college wrestling because let's call it what it is. For a while, as much as we have wanted to have sort of this excitement in college wrestling, it's still been ho hum. Penn State's still number one and they're winning everything. And that's just how it's been, right? Like and not only that, but, and something that we'll get to a little bit later, but it's guys are wrestling less. Robbie and I talked about that last week. There's less competition that's happening. You're seeing the top teams and the top guys hit less than we used to. We talked about that, obviously with Midlands and Scuffle and how we used to have NCAA champions and All-Americans at those events. And this is bringing that type of energy back to it with a guy like David Taylor, who was in the thick of that style of wrestling, where you were the number one guy and you were getting 30, 35 matches in a year and you wanted to go out and compete against the best teams. It wasn't just as much emphasis that was on March. It wasn't just about the NCAA tournament. It wasn't just about Big Tens or Big 12s or any of the other conference tournaments. It was about the things that were happening in season. And hell, we did have Iowa at national duels. Alan Waters and Gilman, that match I will always remember, and we mentioned that last week too.
That was awesome.
There was always some sort of attitude that went into winning at national duels, right? And I can remember, I think Lehigh pulled an upset over a team as well. And like, there were just like the way that teams matched up was just very different. And in, speaking of group text, and one of the group texts I was in, it was, okay, but what is the format, right? And do they do a Power 4 conference and non-Power 4 conference, right? Like, is it the Penn States, the Iowas, the NC States, the Oklahoma States in one pool, and then, name your mid-major non-Power 4 team group here, right? Like, is that what they do? I don't think so, right? I think it is everybody into the pool. We're playing a game of shark, last man standing, right? Like, that's how national duel is going to go.
Yeah. Is it going to be a bracket? Is it going to be pools?
Yeah.
Is it going to be, there's
exactly,
a lot
right?
of
like
variables.
there's a lot of ways that they can go about this. I'm hopeful that we just start to bring the parity back to wrestling, where it isn't just ho hum, Penn State's still number one. They are, but there are a lot of really cool things that are happening and a lot more things that have us talking, a lot more guys that are building brands. And, I think this is the flip side of the coin of spending money in wrestling, right? Everybody talks about that NIL portion of it and how it's great that guys can make money, but it's also ruining things because it's creating a super team or something like that. And you got, look at Iowa, right? Your Corey Teamer, Parco, and
Look at Oklahoma
Buchanan
State.
all left, right? But then look at Oklahoma State. Bunch of guys headed there, right? So there's a lot of change that is going on, but like the NIL portion and the putting money on the line, this is the better side of it. Not to say that it's a bad side of guys making money, but guys transferring and losing some of that parity because teams are just so damn powerful outside of Penn State who just recruits like that is just like
No,
being lost.
they pull guys in too.
Certainly, but it's not as much as these other teams. I mean, the one,
Yeah, that's fair.
what was it, last year or 2 years ago when everybody was talking about Michigan buying a team, right? Where they took everybody from Northwestern and had, this guy and that, like everyone was talking about Michigan buying a team and trying to compete with Penn State. Penn State, I'm sure they spend money on NIL. I'm sure those guys are paid very nicely. I'm sure Carter is very comfortable, but he was a recruit before NIL became a thing. A number of these guys are being recruited and go to Penn State out of the gate, whereas Ja'Cory Teamer was an Arizona State guy. Parco had to leave Fresno State, but he didn't have to leave ASU. So, but no, I hope that National Duels brings more of that excitement. Like I said, that Alan Waters, Gilman excitement, maybe not as controversial and crazy, but some of that team parity that we used to have back into the fold.
Well, look, it's going to be in Tulsa. Thomas Gilman's down there in Stillwater. Can we have a side pot for people to try to reenact that? Is that an option?
Well, Gilman's wrestling. Gilman,
yeah,
Gilman
he said he's not retired.
He's wrestling. He's got a rubber match coming up during the Iowa State duel.
Now, here's shout out to Matt Boy, Seth Duckworth. His comment in our Intermat chat today was, say this was in action today. If we're writing off Penn State and Iowa participating, that puts UNI and Oklahoma State as the de facto national title match for the duels. So that happens this Friday.
Yeah.
So maybe Chad will pony up $100K for that match, and let's see who wins it.
I did see that one of the UNI wrestlers was talking about Schwab addressing the team and said, since we won it this year, can it be can we get
back pay?
Can we get some back pay for winning this year? No, and here's the thing. I know that the video of Kale saying that he wasn't going to be part of National Duels came out before National Duels was announced. But I'm sure that he was privy to the information that was coming for sure.
Probably.
Right.
Well, he even said in the interview, we're going to hear more about it soon.
Yeah. So I'm sure he did. But does the money factor change anything with any of these teams? Right. Like, I don't think it does for Penn State, but does it for
two of those 90-year-old donors who are sitting Matt's side and just pony that up? They're fine.
Yeah. Like they're fine. But like, does that money aspect change things, right? Like, does it change things and say in Iowa where they're like, maybe this is a chance for us to just go get more money, right? If funding is a thing, no matter what team you're on, why not go earn it?
I think it's
more concrete walls without windows, more of those.
This is just going to develop as years go on, like anything will, right? I mean, I think it'd be foolish if 10 years from now, if assuming this remains a thing and remains a big event and it's successful, that those donors start saying, "Why aren't we going to national duels? Why don't you go win that then?"
Yeah,
and then you start seeing more people show up. Yeah, when their own donors are saying, "Go get that money instead," like, or in addition to it, right? Like. That's a lot of money to just not attack.
Or I'll match what you earn at national duels.
Do you think we can put together a team? Can we get an invite? I'll get.
They'll be really short matches.
$20,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my other question too is what's holding these teams back? Is it a training thing? Do they not like the time of year? That's a question I had too. The season starts November 1st. This dual championship's 2 weeks after the season starts, technically, right? So are people going to be peaking for that early in the season and then taper off? I would like to see personally, have this event right before Christmas break.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the
That's what we
current,
kind of hit on last week.
yeah,
Is
just kind of
that timing?
like we have it now. Why is it 2 weeks into the season? Maybe again, first year I get it. Maybe they'll work out some kinks, but why not get Kale, Brands, all the head honcho coaches? What's going to make you guys want to come to this event? Is there a time of year? Is it a location? What is it that's going to get you guys, somewhat thinking about this?
Well, that's the thing, right? And like I said, we talked about it before, where everything that matters is the only thing that matters is March, and
It doesn't have to be that way though.
it doesn't. It
Why do the
certainly
kids
doesn't.
not want to? Why don't kids say, "Hey, we want to be dual meet champs"?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
here's the
sure
thing
kids
for
are
me,
thinking that.
right? Is for us looking from the outside looking in, yeah, like I want to go out there and I want to win as many things as I can win.
Yeah,
Individual matches, NCAAs, if there's a title on the line, like let's go win. But the mentality has shifted, and I think we can shift into the topic that Carter and Bo were talking about on Bo's show, where they discussed competition now versus back in the day. The Kale, Cormier, Askren, those days where guys looked like they were going through war coming off the mat, where it was a literal fight. Now we have a lot more finesse players, obviously, in wrestling, where things look cooler. There's more scrambling. It's not as much. I mean, they're telling you to stay out of the face with palm in the face. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's happening that's a lot different. The rules dictate us having more finesse players, but like, and Carter even said it, like he goes into NCAAs with like what 15 matches. He even said to Bo, like, 3 of my seasons was like one of yours, where they were saying we wanted to be out there. Carter was trying to get into open tournaments when he was a freshman. And all of that has changed to we want our guys to be the freshest that they are in March. The mentality has changed. So when it comes to national duels, and it, like I said, it kind of merges the two topics. When it comes to national duels, if they're putting that there, it's not going to be very enticing because guys want to peak at the right time, and that's not a time for them to want to peak, first of all. So, and it's another competition, right? And it's a lot of competition. You're probably going to wrestle what, 4, maybe 5 dual meets over the course of 2 days, I would say. If you're gonna have how many teams was it? 16 or
16.
16 teams? Yeah, you're gonna have a good amount of matches in there.
and
You
ranked
know,
opponents too, not just
it,
guys.
but
Most
that's
of
also
them
the
are really
thing.
ranked.
That's
Yeah,
also the thing is the competition level will be higher, and that's probably not something that you want at that point in the season. Because if they are tapering off from that tougher in-season competition and waiting to have it till later, having national duels isn't going to be very enticing. I don't want to wrestle him now. I want to wrestle him later. I'm not peaking now. I'm still training. I'm still in my practice mode of getting all of these things together, right? Like I'm still trying to get my shit together so that I am right when we are walking into that arena in Philly, in St. Louis, in Kansas City, in Minnesota, right? Like, so, and I want to get back to the topic of, do you guys feel like wrestling is tougher now, or that technically they're better now, whereas toughness levels were through the roof back in the day?
I'm not going to tell any D1 wrestler they're not tough.
Not
I've made
not so
that
much
mistake
not so
before.
much that I'm
No,
saying
no,
that
no, no.
the factor of the matches being tougher, the
I mean, if
fight
you
being tougher.
look at Kale's record, I mean that's the baseline, right? 159-0. That's almost 40 matches a year for 4 years. That's not many people are hitting that. And a
Even
lot
with
of
a fifth year.
yeah, even with the fifth or seventh year for that matter.
doctor.
Um, yeah. Uh, but teams are designing their schedules to have that lower number. So it's a weird, it's different eras. I mean, that's kind of how you
Mm-hmm.
have to look at it. It's a it's hard to compare because even the style is so different. So is it tougher to wrestle, 5 fist fights, or is it tougher to wrestle 7-minute matches where you're doing gymnastics? Like it's a whole different ball game.
I agree.
It's such a hard question, and like I remember being at, oh man, I'm not gonna remember. I remember the last name because there was a bunch of DeGaines that wrestled. One wrestled for Indiana, one wrestled at Michigan, and I remember it might have been against Ohio State. This would have probably been like 2001, somewhere in that range, and the Gain comes out there and his whole leg is wrapped up and it's a mess and he's just competing his ass off and trying to gut through the match and ultimately has to forfeit out and you're just like, I can't believe this dude showed up. But I do remember seeing a lot of that. So I'm not necessarily saying that now is better because I think you can kind of get more knee injuries and you can kind of get more stuff going on with a lot of the scrambling and rolling around that but man, I do love watching people compete. It's hard for me to say we should have less competition because that's the whole reason we're here, right? Is we love the sport,
Yeah.
participating in it and watching it. But you know, it those were some gritty dudes back in the day, man. Gritty dudes.
Yeah, and just a question kind of as you guys are talking, I thought of is does a loss carry more weight nowadays? Like, is there a different system where rankings are more effective than they were back in the day? Where back in the, I keep saying back in the day, if you took a loss, did it mean as much as it does now? Because seeding is so important and rankings, a lot of these guys use rankings and that gets their seeding formula for NCAAs, right? I just don't know if there was a difference back then if, oh, you had a loss, okay, that's fine. Or now it's like, oh, you have a loss, you're going to be the 4 seed now for sure. You're going to be in this side of the bracket. I just don't know if that was even thought about as much lately, or if that was not even logistically a thing back then. You know what I'm asking.
Yeah,
Well,
like more strategy.
I feel like part of that too is back in the day, the coach had been like, you want to be the best. Who cares what your seed is? Just go beat everybody.
Yeah.
Whoever they put in front of you.
Mentality difference too. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I don't know if the mentality is necessarily different. I'm sure coaches are saying whatever they need to say to their guys to get them up and ready to go out there, regardless of seed. But um, I think that the optics certainly have been over the last couple of years that it matters more, and you see guys picking and choosing where and when they're going to compete as a result.
Yeah,
I already beat David Carr once. I don't need to wrestle him again.
yeah. I mean the strategy of it, right? Like this, it's a lot more strategic of where we're gonna go this week. I mean, we have teams. Was it was it Ohio State or Iowa State? Maybe UNC. One I can't remember. It was one of the teams that were in Nashville. They had like a month off, so like they hadn't wrestled. Might have been UNC. They hadn't wrestled for a while. Like their last match was like before like Christmas, before Thanksgiving or something like that. To the point where like yeah, it was something like that where they hadn't wrestled since like before like around Thanksgiving. And then their next
Yeah,
match was it UNC?
it was UNC. They had Illinois on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then their next one was December 21st for the
Nashville.
collegiate duels.
Yeah. So when I was looking stuff, I'm like, they seriously haven't competed. Like they had like essentially a bye month. They took a month off like in between here, and then they're gonna have even more time off with, the holiday coming too. Like I don't I don't ever remember if that ever happened back then, right? Like where there was a month off during the season where you just weren't competing, where you were just in the lab, just working on stuff, right? Like there was a lot more weigh-ins, there was a lot more, excuse me, there were a lot more matches. So I honestly think that we do have more finesse guys now than what we used to. I'm not saying guys aren't tough. I'll never say that. Wrestling's the hardest sport out there. It's very tough. Um, but as Kevin said, like it's just gritty dudes back then. I mean, the first ever NCAAs that I ever went to, Reeder won his national title. Right? I watched that, a bloody concussed John Reeder screaming at the crowd with bloody tape wrapped around his head. just a very different time. I mean, even then was a very different time. And you go back even further, even still, a very different time. You know, guys are still wrestling injured. Guys are always going to compete injured no matter what the sport is. But it was just a lot more finesse guys this year, or not so much this year, but in this day and age, I guess, than what we used to have. It's just kind of my thought.
Well, and we've talked about it before too, right? I mean, like I do think a lot of it is just you can watch wrestling as a youngster so much easier than you could, that you can see, some of that stuff. You get, other coaching. There's so many other places. At least, when I grew up, I felt like I couldn't get enough coaching and high level experience and seeing stuff, and there just wasn't as much access to it as there is now.
Mm-hmm.
So that certainly helped develop at the youth levels. It goes up, and then as my old self has realized, as time goes on, things tend to get better. And I think that that has a lot to do with it.
The funny thing about you talk about youth is you have like these dads that want their kids wrestling like 200 matches, right? Like
Oh yeah,
thinking that they're going to be recruited in Tulsa. And it's like, no, like nobody, there's not if there's a college kid, or if there's a college coach at a roller tournament, he's probably there coaching his own damn son. He's
yeah,
not there to recruit your kid. Like you don't have to worry about impressing Jordan Burroughs or Coach Manning or any of these guys. They're, I see a lot of Coleman Scott's sons are wrestling right now. Like Coleman's not going to be there. He's not going to tell, any Coach Ryan, hey, I saw this 7-year-old that had a mean double. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so crazy. You're not going to be recruited from a roller tournament. It's not going to happen. But you see
yeah.
these coaches and these dads that want these kids to compete like crazy when they're younger, and then they get to a certain level and they're like, no, back up. Like, you want max 15, 20 matches going into NCAAs, which was not a thing back in the day. So no, I think Carter was kind of spot on where the matches were gritty. They were knockdown, drag out fights, and guys now are a lot more finesse. So I agree with Carter for sure.
But I think it's safe to say too that there are guys back then that would not do as well now, and there are guys now that would
Mm-hmm.
not do as well back then.
For
It's
sure.
it's very different worlds. The Bronicles would have fit in great there. Just beating the hell out of some other dude for however long it took. Yeah, good
Yeah.
times.
Agreed. Let's talk women's wrestling. When Robbie and I talked last week, it was the only vote that had been out was Division One. Since then, Division Two and Division Three got their unanimous votes as well. And we obviously talked about how is NCAA is going to work. Are they going to have all the girls in one place? And now we find that out that it is. It is going to be kind of everyone together for a while until there is enough to split them up. And I talked to the coach at Wilkes and before the vote happened, and he was like, yeah, he's like, I think that's what's going to, when they vote, I think that's what they're going to do. He's like, that's what we've been hearing for quite some time, is that, if it does pass, that it is going to be Division One, Division Two, Division Three, kind of all rolled up into one. Let everybody compete together, and then as time goes on, things start to kind of flourish a little bit within the divisions. They'll have their separate tournaments. How are we feeling about the latest? I mean, obviously we're probably feeling pretty good about it. It's not anything that we're gonna poo poo at this
Completely
point.
against it.
Right, that's what I'm
I'm
saying. Like, I don't
angry.
think we're gonna be too mad
Angry.
about it. But what are your thoughts on the format, how they're gonna do everything, and how you see things growing on that women's side?
The first thing that comes to mind is I love that it's going to be all together initially as it grows. I think that, if anything, in general, the sport of wrestling, but in particular, women's wrestling has done a really good job of is collaborating, right? And kind of working together to figure out how to promote the sport as a whole. So I'm sure they're going to do a really good job with, finding good partners to get it out there and make sure people have eyes on it. I literally just got done talking about how impressive it's been over the years with just the men's side improving and everything. And I'm sure more eyes on the women's side is going to get more people competing, more girls starting at a younger age and developing, and obviously that's going to raise the whole level. Um, which I mean we've also seen over the last several years as we have had such good success domestically. So it's all overall going to be great for the sport, and just having those NCAA affiliations, I would hope would continue to bring in additional revenue as well.
My thought, and once I saw that they were going to have them all together, I'm like, as much as we heard at the Division 1 level last year, I wonder if that guy is going to be in that lineup next year, right? Where there was a lot of poaching talk. I wonder if, I mean, I don't know how, if women's recruiting, obviously men's recruiting has all kinds of rules. They have everything set into place. It's very different, right? I'm sure that women's recruiting is still on the come up, but say you have a Division 3 girl that wasn't able to get recruited. She has a good NCAA tournament. She has a good tournament wrestling against some Division 1, Division 2 girl or whatever else. Do we start to see that happen where they are getting poached from the lesser programs, right? Does I think that putting them all together opens the door for that, especially if NIL money is involved. I'm sure that the women want to be paid. They probably love to be paid the same way that Carter Starocci is being paid. And I hate to throw him out there, but he's kind of the most high profile guy that we have in wrestling right now. So, I'm going to
Certainly
use
talking the most.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna use the
Backing it up.
Yeah.
listen, he's going for his 5th title. So
No, he's putting himself in the center. He's doing
I'm
everything he needs to do to market himself. He's doing a hell
exactly.
of a job
I'm
of
not,
it.
and here's the thing. I'm not pocket watching. I'm not counting a man's money. I'm using him as an example because he is the most watched person that we have on a wrestling mat right now. So just equating him to, a good amount of NIL money is kind of easy. Not pocket watching at all, even though I would love for him to get as much money as he possibly can. Love the kid to death. He's awesome. Super nice kid. Should say probably super nice man at this point. He's like what, 23. Um, but you would have to think that there was some poaching going on, or at least could potential poaching happen at the women's Division 1, 2, 3 NCAA championship if a girl does have a good tournament. You think any of that would ever happen?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you saw it just with the addition of D1 programs snatching up girls who otherwise would have been at D2 and D3 programs. And it's certainly, putting them all together at the highest level and letting them all compete together. You're going to see some gems that were probably under the radar in recruiting that went to a smaller program and got coached up well. And then, it's the same thing we see at the D1 tournament every year. We're going to see a smaller school kid make a run and get picked off and get a good chunk of change for it and end up in one of those bigger team lineups.
Yeah, I mean, it's about, I should say it's about time the NCAA kind of makes this an official thing, right? It's the fastest growing sport in the country and has been for the past, I don't know, half decade, maybe in a decade.
Yeah.
Uh, I think, Iowa having a women's program at the forefront was a major key in that decision. Big school like Iowa, born and bred to wrestle, such a tradition from the men's side. And, it's good to have a school like Iowa, but my other question is who's the next quote unquote big school to step up? Is it going to be Penn State, Oklahoma State, Ohio State, Nebraska? Which of those schools is going to step up? And, is there a concern that with NIL being such a thing now, is that money getting diverted towards the male athletes where originally could have went to the women's school? I know, I think it was John Smith in an interview last year, 2 years ago, kind of mentioned that a little bit, like, hey, you guys want NIL, it may slow up your women's team being brought up because there's only so much money to go around. That's the reality of it, right? But with so much money getting thrown into the sport here, I think we're going to start seeing another big program pop off with the women's team, and then I think we're just going to follow suit. I just think that's kind of a minor hesitant I have in the back of my mind there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Oklahoma State does have a team.
Yeah.
They do. They have the
They've got the club
Cowgirls.
team.
That's right. They just hired
Alleged.
Olenek.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's their coach. They had a women's match last week during the blackout duel that they did. So yeah, I mean they're doing some things, and Lehigh obviously has a team. They just signed a girl from Easton.
That was a big
So
pickup.
yeah, she's pretty good.
Yeah.
So you are seeing these teams that are putting these things together. Obviously, we would love to see a lot more. And that's not to discredit the women's teams that have been out there doing it for such a long time, right?
Yeah.
There's been so many. I can remember, so obviously, Austin and I know, but Mitch Minotti, and I'm sure you guys remember Mitch, who goes to Lehigh.
Yeah.
Yeah, his backup in high school was a girl. Her name is Casey Kruchek. She actually went to Campbellsville and she wrestled with Miracle. So, and she was there at that point. So I was, back home covering wrestling from for our hometown newspaper, and I would write about her all the time because she was actually doing really, really well. I think she ended up maybe second at the national tournament that they had back then. So it's obviously come a long way, but there have been so many teams that have been doing this for such a long time that I think it's going to be awesome to see them now on this grand stage as well. Right. So, not just the Division I, Division II, Division III teams that are currently getting funding, like Mama Mater at Wilkes and getting approval. These girls have been grinding for a very long time, and they definitely deserve to get the pub and to have the spotlight. And I'm anxious to see how things are covered and how well the tournament is attended and how much support the fans give it, because everybody can tout and be super excited about, this vote and how it's unanimous and everything else. Now you really got to pony up. You got to start watching women's wrestling more. You got to start paying attention. And I'm hopeful, and Robbie and I talked about this last week, I'm hopeful that we start to see our women's legends in the coaching chairs, see Helen in a coaching chair, Jakar in a coaching chair, see them start to pass on. I mean, I know that, a lot of them are still competing, but let's start to see them, coaching the next generation and bringing these girls up and doing some of the same things that I was doing now.
Yeah, imagine if you get like a Adeline Gray or Sarah Hildebrandt or some of these people that have just been the staples of USA women's wrestling for the last several years, jumping in and essentially kind of doing what David Taylor's tried to do recently at Oklahoma State, and big name hire and big name coaching and, keep it moving.
For sure. Let's talk a little movies.
Yeah.
I think we've all seen Unstoppable at this point.
Don't tell my wife.
Tell her, make sure she just doesn't watch the show.
She doesn't want to listen to me talk about wrestling in person. She's certainly not going to listen to me on a podcast.
She's a weekly tuning in person.
Yeah.
My wife too.
What'd you guys think of the movie?
It was awesome.
Johnny DeJulius really made it the movie.
He was great. He was really great. I loved every bit of it, man. I read the book when it came out, and I mean, that was a number of years ago, and so I was excited to see it hit the big screen. I thought the acting was really well. Like it was they did a good job fitting a lot. I mean, it's a big long book about like his whole growing up and struggle and everything, right? And putting it together. And there's a lot of important pieces that you can't always fit into 2 hours, but they did a really, really good job picking out the important pieces, making it, hit home for you, his family and the struggles at home. I mean, it was like, I know they say this about sports movies a lot, so I'm going to, steal it, but it basically was like a movie about family that involved wrestling. You know what I mean? Like that just happened to be the conduit that they used to explain, his family life and situation and those struggles. And it was just really, really well done. So yeah, was a big fan. I watched it today partially to see if I could, show it to my kids, and I can also say happily, yeah, totally can.
Yeah. It's fun. It's funny you say that because a friend of mine was like, he he didn't say he hated it, but he was like, I don't like it. And I'm like, well, why? And he's like, well, the person that they put for Tom Brands, he's an Iowa fan. The actor that they hired for Tom Brands was horrible. I'm like, Tom Brands was not a focal point of this movie whatsoever. They
Yeah,
they
right.
could have put
It's always
somebody
about
else.
Iowa with these people.
It doesn't matter that they put that guy in the like. I mean, it was cool they put Jesse Jansen in the movie as his assistant, but Tom Brands was not a focal point. He had like
Yeah.
2-3 scenes in the whole thing. He's
Matt
like,
McDonough wasn't in it. That was
Yeah.
Johnny DeJulius.
yeah, right.
He's the Buckeye.
He's like, well,
I saw
he's
his
like,
parachute.
he's like, but you can tell that they've never shot a wrestling match before, and it just some of the wrestling just wasn't realistic. And I'm like, you understand that this was not a movie about wrestling. Like this was about Anthony's life. It just so happens that he was a champion wrestler, and that was like wrestling was the underlying story. So literally, Kevin, like you saying that, I'm like, I had to have that conversation with a friend of mine who just was like, yeah, I didn't like this. I'm like, then you watched it because you wanted it to be Vision Quest. That's the
Right.
problem, is you wanted another Vision Quest and you
We
didn't
all
get
do.
that.
It's
And
like watching Rocky and being like, the boxing was unrealistic. It's like, well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a boxing movie. Like,
Yeah. Exactly. So like it's just the sport part of it is the underlying thing. Like it just wasn't what the story was about, right? So the only thing that I didn't like is that they put him in the finals against McDonough twice.
yeah,
That-
no, I got that. That
That had me questioning my own knowledge at one point where I was like, wait a second. I was there when they wrestled, and I don't think that it happened like that was the only part that I was like, there's some Hollywoodization here, which you knew was gonna happen. And it was, it was cool that they made it more of a redemption type of a thing. I think still would have been awesome if they would have, made him play seventh like he actually did in that NCAAs. But that was the part where I was like, man, somewhere Andrew Long is punching the air right now because he's expecting to see himself and he is not there at all. But other than that, no, I thought it was awesome. And, I had obviously the privilege of talking to Anthony and interviewing him about the movie before even seeing it. So having him explain a lot of these things and, how hard it was to kind of go through reliving these life events, and then him, saying how, him and his mom both shed tears and cried when they walked into the remake of the Philadelphia Arena. So like me watching that after interviewing him, I'm like, man, this is like another part that he talked about. So that was like really cool, personally for me. But I thought the movie was great. I thought they did a really good job. Fellas, what were your thoughts?
I think I was most happy that they put as much into it as they did, production value wise,
Yeah.
cast wise. Like there was an investment to make it a really good movie. It wasn't just this, well, this guy did this, we're gonna make a quick buck on it and throw this out there. Like they did a really good job telling the story. And I think I was like 50 yards from the mat watching in 2011, and like that, the crowd reaction was unlike anything I've experienced, and just kind of it had that feeling. And I really enjoyed like how much it felt real to what I remember.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't seen it yet, but I do have.
God
I do have
damn it, Austin.
wrestling buddies non-wrestling buddies, I have to say, that saw it and they were really impressed with it. They're asking how I was like, sorry guys, I haven't had time to watch it yet, but I've heard good things from non-wrestling people, so I think I'm excited to
You
watch
talk to non-wrestling people?
it. I have a few in my life. Yeah, I mean, they're not that close. Not like you guys.
Yeah, no, I mean it was definitely a good movie. They did a really good job with it. The wrestling actually, I mean, that's why another reason why I was kind of mad at my friend for thinking that the wrestling part of it wasn't. I'm like, they brought in his high school coach to do all the wrestling parts of it. They obviously had to make a little bit like taper back on it, but they brought him in to make sure it was like true to wrestling. So they're, they were really authentic in the movie. And the other thing that made me laugh was them weighing in on the old scales. That was the
Oh
other
yeah.
that was the other that was the other thing. It made me laugh. I was like, that I'm like, we had digital scales back in 99. Like there's
The only thing that would have made that better is if it was one of the stock scales. Like you had to get on that, like the cattle scale that we usually weigh
they
in
had to
on.
move the weights.
That would have been even better.
Yeah. No,
It's,
good,
I did.
definitely good movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Hopefully we didn't we probably spoiled some things for you, but I don't really care at this point,
Yeah, Austin, he wins.
Yeah,
He
Yeah,
wins
right.
the national title.
Oh, he does. Good.
he
Ooh.
Yeah.
does
Well,
he does win.
well, and I was gonna say, the last two notes I have is I like that he was gracious, or they were gracious in the movie to McDonough because it wasn't that close in the actual match.
Yeah.
It was in the movie. But the other thing I was a little upset with is that like they didn't have some drunk kid in CMU gear running around in the stands like 50 rows up. Like I wasn't featured at all. You know, I was there too, Robbie. We should have hung out more. I didn't know you then, but
That's
no, it
funny.
was
We were all there.
yeah. It turns
Yeah.
out
We're gonna be back there in a few months, right?
Yeah.
Well, some of us are.
time will tell. Time will tell. I gotta make some moves. I think, but we'll see.
Yeah. We were all there. And I mean, the only person I knew at that point was Austin. And he was way younger at that point. But yeah, we were all in the arena at that point and had no idea. That's actually the day I met Mike Mal. We somehow made our way into the Princeton suite. Don't know how. And but I mean, with you guys knowing both me and Mike Mal, I'm sure you can probably figure it out.
That checks out.
And
Yep.
and that's how I met Mike Mal. We were standing there watching wrestling and just started talking, and that's how I met him.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was actually in
And
a suite too. I think you guys were like one or two next to me.
probably,
Pretty rowdy crowd over there.
yeah.
I was not in a suite.
Those Princeton guys,
I was
Oh, I got it.
volunteering.
they get
That
pretty
was the first
crazy.
tournament that I volunteered at, and I think I did about 5 minutes of work, and the rest of the time I just kind of hung out in the tunnel watching all the matches. It was pretty awesome. Then
Great.
Yeah, good movie. Definitely go watch it. Definitely go see it. Anthony, I mean, there are points where see when you watch the movie, see if you can tell when it's Anthony doing a stunt and it's Jarrell doing a stunt. Because you can tell. You can certainly tell when it is Anthony. And the only other thing I will say is also go look up on IMDb the casting and look at Shane Sparks. You will be
I
very
almost peed
happy
myself.
when you go
That
do
was
that.
hilarious.
Yeah. So yeah. Let's talk controversial celebration.
So we here. Let's have a natural transition here. Who else won from Arizona State in 2011,
Bubba Jenkins.
yes.
and how did he celebrate?
He shot.
Oh, he threw his
he,
armbands up.
he shot the bands.
Look at this transition. So
Look at
let's
that
move
transition.
into Stillwater.
Yes, moving into Stillwater. First of all, I loved Bubba Jenkins. I loved the celebration. I did not love the celebration in Stillwater. And the only reason is because you simulated that you literally murdered your opponent on the mat. And we can't all rejoice that Sammy Sasso is okay after being shot and missing a season and having the comeback that he has. And then we're all okay with seeing that, right? Like if he would have shot into the air like Anthony Ashnall in probably one of the best pieces of content I ever captured when I was at Flow,
I was gonna say, yeah.
I'm all good with it. I'm all good with it. I am all for celebrations all the time. I just didn't like the simulated murder in the middle of the mat. I'm cool with it. Fine with celebration. But that was the only part where I'm like, man, like you could have
turned like
just
30
turn,
degrees to the
yeah,
left.
like turn around something, right? Like, but
Aim at
it
the
is
mascot.
what it is.
Nobody likes mascots anyway.
It is, yeah, it is what it is. It happened. There are people that are saying, I mean, JDJ, Starocci, they're saying that they loved it, saying that it was awesome because, it gets people talking, it shows personality. I'm all for that. I love celebrations. I love it. I was a shit talker and celebrator myself as an athlete. I'll never, shit on anybody for celebrating. I just didn't like that he, shot at Spratley essentially after pinning him. But besides that, I was good with him celebrating. I care less.
I was watching it, so I had seen already at that point the celebration on Twitter, I think it was, and I put the duel on just because I wanted to watch the duel. But at the same time, like my in-laws are there, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law were there, their kids were there, and like they're all running around playing. But like this is the only thing on TV at the time, so we were watching that. And I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was coming up, and everybody was kind of just sitting there watching. And as soon as it happened, like the whole room was like, "Oh my God, what the hell did he just do?" Like, what was that? And I was like, "Yeah, no, he shouldn't have done that, And like, here's the thing: like, it's all good to get people talking and whatever, but like, there's good talk and there's bad talk. Like, nobody who watched that who like liked that at all.
There's no such thing as bad publicity.
I think there is. I don't like that kid anymore. Like that was, glad I stopped myself from swearing, but Jesus, that was wherever the line is. Like, you know what else I think they shouldn't be allowed to do? Like pretend to slit their throat or like scalp them. Like there's just like things that are messed up, and that's
or pee
one
on
of
them.
Yeah, like yeah. Who was that? Didn't somebody do that? Are we talking Odell Beckham?
Like, who was that?
That was Odell Beckham in the NFL, or was
yeah.
wrestling too? Yeah. Like, there's just things where we're like, what? One of my buddies said this the other day, and I think it's a really good just quote in general. But if you have to like think of whether or not this is a good idea, it's probably a bad one, And that was a bad idea, and like. Celebration aside, right? Like celebrating, I'm generally down for, and I understand that like being at Gallagher, EIWA, and everything, and having that moment where you get that big pin and against the guy who was ranked third in the country, I think at the time, like that's a big deal for you in your career. Have the presence of mind to maybe choose a different celebration, is my thought, and hopefully maybe he will in the future, and. Or maybe he'll just do double Uzis next time. I don't know, but like, I hope there's a change.
That's hard to control. They're just going everywhere.
Yeah, just double-barreled shotguns, and I don't know. That also I would probably frown upon, but like, just I don't know. I didn't. It was tasteless in my mind.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm all for celebrating wins, especially a big upset. Simulating murdering somebody, probably not a good look. I understand, the Cowboys do the pistol fingers. Yeah, that's great. That's what their mascot does. Mm-hmm. But they're not
real Cowboys.
Yeah. We've established
those aren't real six shooters.
Yeah.
It
wouldn't be allowed.
I mean, a little personal knowledge and reflection from him would probably be good. I'm going to leave that at that. Yeah. But just, be better. Like, find a better way to celebrate. It's a great win. Don't cheapen it by doing dumb shit.
Yeah, because instead of us talking about how you pinned the number 3 kid in the country, you were talking about your celebration and was it over the line or not. There hasn't been a conversation of how well you wrestled at all around this match. You pulled off a huge upset. One of the upsets that I'm sure at the end of the year will be on a list of biggest upsets of the year, and no one's talking about the match.
And Spratley
also, if your name is Jett, why aren't you flying around?
Yeah,
there's so many options with that name.
So many options. Austin, your thoughts?
I part of me feels like we're the old man yelling at the clouds, but yeah, I think we're all on the right track with that. It's just you can't do that directly at an opponent. If you go up and you guys in the Iowa guys used to do the break, I broke you thing. That's obviously different, right? You're not trying to pretend to murder somebody, but
unless you grab his arm and do that,
unless you physically break it,
unless you cartwheel into a Kimura, not a fan.
Also frowned upon.
Yeah, that's
also that was amazing that happened. Can we just throw that out there?
I don't think any of us are the act like you've been there kind of guy. I'm certainly not that guy because
no.
I've never been there. I've never been in this position right now. I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate the fact that this just happened.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
You're right. Like you don't have to celebrate the fact, Frank. Like just say earmuffs. But no, like I'm going to celebrate it. That's what I'm going to do, right? And I will never tell somebody that they can't celebrate. Um, Split and double birds, too far for me.
Gotta go
Now
single
it's
bird on that.
now it's kind of a
road
thing,
runners.
but
Yeah, the road
yeah,
runners.
now we're getting road runners with it. But
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You want to celebrate and go ahead and celebrate. Like I said, the thing for me is we can't all be excited to see Sasso recover from a gunshot wound and then be like, yeah, but that's okay. Like he didn't actually have a gun. You know what I mean? Like so, and on top of that, we've seen the fact that he didn't lose a team point was surprising to
Yeah,
me.
that blew my mind.
Wild. It's wild.
Absolutely
That was
surprising to me.
You lose a team point for throwing headgear down, but you can fake shoot somebody. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. That needed to be a team point. I'm sure.
Also,
the
generally he's a
officials-
really good ref too, and that I would expect him to do that.
I can
Yeah.
only assume he just didn't see it.
I don't think he
know.
saw it. I don't think he saw the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair because he was behind him.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think he saw the whole thing. But
There's I'm sure a conversation with with the reffing body or powers that be that are like, dude, that can't ever happen again.
Yeah.
It was a pretty big weekend for them having conversations about shittiness, but that's a whole other conversation too.
Yeah.
A lot to cover in that.
A lot to cover. So much to cover. We haven't even talked about the wrestling yet. Let's
There was
honestly,
wrestling. We're supposed to talk about that.
There was wrestling that went on. Let's talk about it. Penn State, Nebraska
That was pretty cool.
a lot of fun to watch. Ridge Lovett is a gangster, man. And the fact that he pulls off a major against Van Ness, who honestly looked unstoppable this year.
Yeah.
Very impressed by that entire match.
Even directly said last week when we talked, somebody was saying that he would get a major, and we both said no.
Yeah,
but no, he did it. He did it.
Like, I don't know about that, but we did say that because Penn State has shut out a ton of teams, they've only lost one match in in any of the duels where they've given up any points. It's only been one match that they've lost. This is the first duel where they lost multiple, and it was only two matches, right? Like, so that definitely did happen, but like it also did truly assert Penn State's dominance as well, right? They go from taking 9 out of 10 matches or 10 out of 10 matches to taking 8 out of 10 matches. They're still just like head and shoulders above everyone. But certainly a hat tip to Nebraska for filling that stadium, filling their gym and their arena, getting the fans out, having, first class fan support and a first class atmosphere for a big duel. Right. And that was an amazing part as well. They had seats that were right on the floor. They had an elevated stage. Like, that was awesome. That was really cool. And it's what you should do when you are bringing in the number one team in the country, when you are bringing in a big marquee team, treat it like a Super Bowl, because it is, right? You have the number one team in the country in your gym. Make sure that you put on a showcase. I mean, they gave out hats, which were pretty cool and pretty jealous of. Brian
Snyder.
But yeah, like it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to see. What were your takeaways? Who impressed you the most? What were you impressed by during the Nebraska Penn State duel?
So two things quickly before I talk about the actual wrestling. One, nobody got me one of those Herbie beanies, and I'm pretty pissed. So Brian Snyder, you scared me, so I'm not actually going to fight you. But I'm not happy with you. Yeah, Dr. Snyder, not happy with you. The second part is, like, I grew up between Wyoming and Nebraska, between my parents. So I've been to a lot of Nebraska duels, and I've seen the growth of that program through the years, and the effect that Manning has had on that program, and the growth of that program and the fan base over the course of his 10 years is fantastic. When I used to go to duels, there was at the Coliseum, so the smaller venue that was on campus, was their volleyball gym for a long time. Devaney used to be their basketball arena. Then they built a new one, and they remodeled that into the volleyball and wrestling arena. It's an awesome venue. They did a fantastic job remodeling that. I was at the previous record duel when Oklahoma State came in, I think 2005.
That was like 3,000 people or something like that.
Yeah. So it was double. right? And that's just fantastic that in that time span, he's continually put out such a good product and it's continued to grow every year. So it's, kudos to him and that crew because Snyder's been there for a very long time too. So it's just on that note, they've done a great job.
Agreed.
Still not happy with you, Dr. Snyder.
I liked finally got to see some Luke Lillidahl hit a quality opponent there and Caleb Smith and beat him. He's an All-American and I think he was in control for most of that match. Lillidahl, had a few opportunities, couldn't quite capitalize, and again, true freshman going up against a 6th-year senior and in his home gym, and he was up for the task. I think Lillidahl kind of solidified himself as one of the top 3, maybe top 4 guys in there, and he might be on top of the podium come March. I think that dude's really good. And just watching that Ridge Lovett Van Ness match. I mean, you guys hit up before. It's like, how did that become a major? And part of me thinks, obviously it's gonna be a close match come March, but I feel like with some Penn State magic, Van Ness might win that one come March again. I don't think that's too crazy to say, because it was like one turn, maybe 2 turns that kind of blew that match open. Just one turn, yeah. And yeah, I just think that could be Van Ness's match come March again, because just someone with Penn State and Friday and Saturdays in March, they're different matches somehow. But yeah, I'm interested to see that one again. We'll probably see it Big Tens, honestly, though, right?
Possible.
I'm gonna miss Ridge Lovett. I
He's
just
a
love
treasure.
Fun to watch. He's so
watching
fun.
him. Oh, dude, think about all the matches we've gotten with him over the years. I mean, he had a barn burner with Gomez like 3 years ago, NCAA finalist, and just the joy that he brings to the mat every time is super fun. Watching him kind of get to soak in that crowd and get him pumped up after the win was pretty cool. So just a big fan of his and always appreciated his approach. I was impressed with Van D getting that win over Braden Davis. I mean, that's a pretty big win for him.
And he's a wild card. It's hard to know what to expect from him.
Yeah.
And we've seen him over the years be able to get some big wins against quality opponents, and then sometimes he just drops some other matches, right? But that was a huge win for him, and I'm sure Braden is going to be getting after it the next time. But I did want to make sure we shout out Tyler Kasak getting that win too. I mean, that Taylor is so good, and Kasak just kind of took it to him. He controlled the pace of the match. He didn't ever seem to really be in that much trouble. And I just started thinking again in general, 157. I'm like, is he going to win it all? Like, I know Shapiro's looked great at times this year, and Teamer's been out for a while. Kasak's looked good. I was very impressed.
Now, after that dual meet, obviously some shifting in the rankings. Braden Davis is now the highest ranked wrestler in Penn State's lineup, and he's 7th. Everybody in their lineup is top 10.
What a slack ass. Jeez.
Let's back up. Everybody in their lineup is top 7, I should say, because everyone is 7 and above. Lillidahl is now 6th after beating Smith.
So everyone is ranked as an All-American.
Everyone is ranked to make the podium in Penn State's lineup. And Robbie and I talked about it last week, but I want Austin and Kevin to chime in. Is this the best Penn State lineup we've ever seen?
Go ahead, Austin.
I think there's an argument for it. Like you said, 7 guys, 10 guys in the top 7. You could get 10 All-Americans. I mean, my question is, how many champs are they going to have? That one year they had, 4? Or they had 5 one year? I forget.
They had 4. They put 5 in the finals.
Yeah, is that what it was? Yeah, so 5 finalists, 4 champs. Is that going to happen again?
They've yet to match Oklahoma State, who had 5.
Yeah. So again, it depends what we consider best. What do you weigh champions more? Do you weigh All-Americans more? Or team scoring? They might break their own record again. These guys they're out there for blood, and so if I had to pick, I'm going to say no, not yet. But I think next year, the year after that, they're going to be in that conversation.
Because who is it? Minnesota that had 10 out of 10 All-Americans?
Yeah.
No champs though, right?
Right.
Correct.
Just,
Yeah.
just
But
10
they,
over.
but they were
One or
team
two.
champs.
Yeah, but they were team champs with that.
Yeah.
We're also the champs in my heart that year.
Kevin, your thoughts?
I wanted to shout out Bo Bartlett before I forget. I was just looking through the rankings and I was like, oh yeah, that match with Hardy was awesome too. What, 8-7?
That was a
Wild.
great match.
Yeah.
He won
super
it
sweet.
on like 2 less seconds of riding time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then it would have gone to overtime at least, but
It would have
still,
gone to
like, yeah.
overtime, yes, but yeah, like the
Wouldn't have been mad
seconds
about
of
that.
riding time coming off the clock is what helped make it happen.
Crazy.
Yeah, no, shout out to him real quick before I forgot. But it's funny. So I literally last week, I think it was Monday, I had to record just with travel schedule and everything, and I just did it by myself because I was just timing and scheduling wise. I recorded Blood Round by myself, and that's how I started. It was like, I think this is the best team.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is better than last year. And I think that, sure, you're missing out on a guy like Aaron Brooks, from their team score potential. But I think realistically, if you just supplant his team score with that of Mitchell Messenbrink this year, I think Messenbrink's going to outscore him at the tournament. You also have to look at the fact that Kirkfleet is now going to have a steeper hill to climb to get another championship. But
He's got to beat Isaac Trumbull.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Amongst others.
Yeah. And he'll be on one side of the bracket. He might actually end up being on the same side of the bracket because I don't think Hendrickson or Stevenson or Kirkfleet are going to wrestle each other. Does Penn State wrestle Oklahoma State this year?
Yes.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least those guys are going to see each other.
Pretty
They
sure.
wrestle Michigan or Minnesota as well.
Looking at Penn State's schedule right now. I'm pretty
No,
sure
they don't.
do.
No, they don't.
Okay.
I don't. I remember looking this up somewhere, but I don't. Yeah, Minnesota and Penn State, I don't think wrestle one another during the regular season. So those guys
they
are
don't
likely
wrestle.
to see him.
They don't wrestle Oklahoma State either.
Okay. So there we go. So those guys likely are going to go into the tournament. Yeah, you'll probably have Kirkfleet as a 3 seed. They wouldn't be on the same side. They'll likely have Kirkfleet as the 3 seed.
Well, Kirkby will have Feldman with Ohio State though.
Yeah, Feldman's the only like
Yeah.
top heavyweight. Well, yeah, top heavyweight that he would see. I mean, Keeter. He'll also see Keeter
Yara
next week and Yara
Luffman.
next week.
and Luffman.
So yeah,
Yara's been having a rough run.
Let's assume he wins those for the
Yeah,
sake of
yeah.
the argument, right?
he's favored.
He'll likely be in the finals at NCAAs, but point being for team score wise, a little tougher. But then you've got Josh Barr, who's looked awesome this year. Obviously, Starocci's doing his thing. Haynes, I assume, is a top. I mean, he's one of the 2 guys I would pick at 174, maybe Amity, depending on O'Toole and everyone's health or whatever. But like, these guys are likely going to outperform what they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it that way, then you think maybe they'll probably outscore on the points or on the scoreboard too. So
that was the other thing we talked about is could they break their point scoring record? And shout out to our man Slap Matt. If you go look at last week's show, he has 2 comments. He commented 3 times, but the 2 comments break down all the scoring, like all the scoring. He goes full nerd out on it, and I love it. So appreciate him for doing that. The other guy told us that we need to wrap this shit up, and we could have made the entire show in 25 minutes, which timestamps are there. So if you want to skip around all the nonsense and things that we talk on other topics, then you're happy to, go ahead and do that. But
if we didn't
I
off
told
on
you my
these
wife
tangents,
listens to the show.
if we didn't go off on these tangents, we wouldn't have found out that we were all at the same place in 2011. So
very true. Very, very true.
I have a story to tell you about that tournament off camera.
Oh, very nice.
To it.
But he did do the team score, the scoring breakdown. So you can see like it is possible for them to break their scoring record. Literally, I mean, because if you look at last year, Braden Davis doesn't place and they broke the scoring record. So very possible for them to do that because I don't see Braden Davis not making the podium this year with how he's wrestling. He may have just lost to Van D, but still very different, right?
He's a wild start to that match.
Yeah, he's a top 8 guy. And there was a very wild start. I mean, a Jonesy Tilt puts him out 7-0, 7-1. So that's the brunt of
I love a good Jonesy.
Brunt of the points. But yeah, I mean, it is possible. But definitely wanted to get your guys' take on that because we were not all together last week when we posed that question. What other dual meets, before we move on to what we have coming up this week that we're excited about, what other dual meets caught your guys' eye outside of Nebraska, Penn State from last week, Robbie, in the ACC?
Wasn't a whole lot of action in the ACC. The biggest one was Stanford knocking off Arizona State. Last year was a 2-point duel. This year came down to the last match, and EJ Parco pulled off a big upset of Jesse Vasquez in the last second takedown.
Jesse Vasquez is also in Unstoppable, by the way. I did see him in there.
So look, we're bringing it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big win. My biggest takeaways from this weekend, the ACC, were just a lot of shitty officiating that made me angry.
Yeah.
If you have a free hour, if you want to go back and wade through the Appalachian State, Virginia Tech 65 and 74 matches and not ram your head into a wall because it was atrocious.
It was really
good
bad.
luck.
It was really, really bad. What did the coaches have to say about that?
I asked what explanations they were given, and it was, well, they didn't really tell us. They ran away really fast after the duel.
Yeah.
You got to get out of here.
Not a lot of positive comments from either side about the officiating on that one.
Yeah. Austin, in the EIWA and Ivy, what went on last week that was noteworthy?
Honestly, not a lot in the Ivy. A lot of teams were kind of off. Cornell had a few guys at the Cyclone Open, kind of had a bunch of place winners there. One that caught my eye in the EIWA, Navy took out Lehigh. I'm not sure when last time that happened, but Lehigh obviously a little dinged up, not 100%, but big win for a program like Navy. And EIWA actually has two divisions this year, the Patriot Division and the Independence Division. So Navy.
Those are terrible names. Come on.
I didn't
be
come up
better.
with them. I just write the stories. But
that was terrible.
Yeah, but Army and Navy could come down to division championship in the middle of February. So keeping my eyes on that. If Army does,
is it on land or in water?
I think it's at Army this year, so it's on land.
Okay, so good then.
So Army has an advantage there. But yeah, it just fun match every year and a lot of bragging rights, and might have a little bit something on the line this year, which might be cool. So definitely looking forward to that.
Kev, anything else in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I liked watching Iowa and Illinois. That was a big duel and a couple big matches in there. Ayala getting the win over Lucas Bird was a pretty wild match. Parco over Cannon Webster as well. They won the big matches in this. Gabe Arnold and Edmund Ruth was a good one too. Oh yeah, and I forgot Luffman did beat Keeter in that one 3-1. Yeah. So that was pretty interesting. But Iowa looks good, man. They're just top to bottom, really, really good.
I think that we see Gabe Arnold for the rest of the season now.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that was a good indicator, and I think I also saw the lineup cards for this weekend.
Has Teamer listed.
Teamer is listed, and Arnold is the only one listed from what I had seen in their duel for this weekend. So maybe we do see Teamer. They do have Penn State next week, so maybe this is a way of Teamer testing it out, because if they're going to compete with Penn State next week, which, sorry to say it, but it's going to be really tough, he would have to get through this one against Ohio State this week to truly figure that out. And could you imagine if it was Sasso versus Teamer this week at 57? It'd be awesome to watch. Because now that Patty Gallagher and Sasso have switched places, that is solidified for Ohio State. And then Teamer making his return could be fun. Could be pretty cool.
And maybe that Iowa Penn State match next week, by the way.
You will be there?
I'm trying to get tickets. Yeah, if I can make it work, I'll be there. So never been to one of those matches. It should be fun.
Pretty cool.
That will be awesome. The only other one I watched at an airport was Minnesota and Michigan. That was a good duel. Michigan's obviously got some guys out of the lineup that we thought would be there at this point in, when the two teams matched up. But it was good. Von Bauer and Lemley was a great match. Von Bauer got the win there. But Bo Mantanona got a nice win over Andrew Sparks. McAnally and Bullock went to overtime. And then Cardenas just looks like a monster, man. He took it to Salazar pretty good. And then Gable, man, he just been in there and pinned Heinzelman. No big
Balled
deal.
him up.
Yeah. Just a solid cross-face cradle.
It's like wrestling an actual bear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
With
not
lots
even
of
fair.
tattoos.
Lots of tattoos. Yeah. He got a lot of tattoos in a hurry.
Yeah.
Been there.
Yeah.
It happens.
It does. It certainly does. I've got a lot of them. What are we excited for this week? Kevin, continue. Keep it going in the Big Ten.
Yeah. So, I mean, we were talking about Penn State. I think I'm excited just to keep watching Penn State just because they are really, really good. And we just talked about the fact that they're one of the best teams I've ever seen. That's what I said to my family the other day when I eventually threw on one of their duels as well. And I was like, this is the best team I've ever seen. Top to bottom, every one of their guys. Again, I don't really care at the end of the year if they break their own record. I'm still going to go down as saying, like, talent-wise, this is just an unbelievable thing to watch.
Yeah.
And
it is kind of relative to the competition, though, too.
Yeah, yeah. But Hawkeyes and the Buckeyes, the Battle of the Eyes is going to be pretty exciting.
Don't get an eye poked out.
Yeah.
That should be fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to Nebraska, Michigan. That should be a fun one. It obviously sucks that there are some injuries in Michigan's lineup, but still be fun. Nebraska, I remember last year when who didn't Michigan beat?
Michigan beat Iowa.
And then the following week, Nebraska was like, that was cool. We're going to do that to you. And just like shut them out in the first half of the first half of the duel. So I think that one could be really cool to watch. So yeah, that's the one that is on my radar to see this week. And I think that's it. I think that's until next week. Robbie, what's happened in the ACC?
Two big ones to watch. Let's see. Virginia Tech's at Duke. Shouldn't see anything new lineup return wise that match. Pitt will be down at NC State. That'll be a pretty fun duel. Upper weights will have some really good matchups. And then Virginia is out traveling to Stanford. They should hopefully be back to full strength this week. Hunter Garvin, Nick Hamilton will be a really fun match if that happens. There's some sneaky good matches in that one. Guys pretty close and that are going to determine a lot of the results at the ACC tournament as far as team score goes. Kind of backside matches to watch and will have a big impact on. So that'll be a fun one to keep an eye on. That one's on Sunday, and the other two are on Friday. North Carolina is hosting the North Carolina tournament. I'm not sure what that is.
I feel like that's kind of like the Cyclone Open, isn't it?
Yeah. As of right now, only the starting lineup is listed for North Carolina. So nobody else is listed. Not sure what's going on there.
Open practice.
Yeah. The smart guys are gonna punch each other in the face this weekend, right? Are we getting some EIWA and Ivy League action?
Yeah.
Can they punch some better names for the conference divisions?
I'll see what I can do. I'll talk.
I was gonna say, I think we know a guy that probably is in some of those meetings, right?
I might know someone. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, EIWA wise, Drexel Rider, it's not great. Not top tier level wrestling, but a nice little rivalry that they have. They've had it for a while between Coach Taylor and Coach Childs, who have combined for like over 800 wins or something crazy like that. So, nice little rivalry there. They have a match Saturday. I think that's at Ryder. Surprised Clonch didn't mention the Chippewa Challenge this weekend.
Oh my God, what's wrong with me?
That on Sunday.
That is this weekend. Yeah. Oh, I'm so pumped for that.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Fire up Chips.
It was 2 years ago. American won every duel by like 1 point. It was great, crazy matches. So that's usually fun to watch. And Cal State Bakersfield will be there, so we'll get to see a little bit more of fast man race car emoji guy. So should be fun.
It really should be restated that American literally won every duel by a point.
Yeah.
and won the whole thing.
3-0 with a 3-point spread. Yeah.
It was wild. Yeah, Central won the first one. American won the second one. Campbell won last year. I think Central's winning it again this year.
Nice. The only other one that I'm going to be watching is Oklahoma State and UNI. That's going
to be awesome.
A lot of fun. Some very fiery coaches. I would love to see Gilman and Schwab maybe throw on a singlet and go at it at intermission.
I would pay a lot of money to watch that.
I would, yeah.
More so in an octagon than on a wrestling match.
I certainly would love to see those guys go at it. I think it would be pretty awesome. But no, I think it's going to be a good duel. Certainly watching that one, as I said, on top of the Big Ten, the ACC and the EIWA stuff that we have going on.
You think Schwab will have any festive shirts on?
I don't know. I think his wife may have hid all of them. But
Allison, get it together.
I'm hopeful. I mean, we can only hope. We can only hope for some very festive Schwab attire. Maybe we should call it festive Schwab swag is what we'll go with.
I like it.
There we go. That's well done.
That's how we'll go out for this one. So, gentlemen, it was good to have everybody back into the fold this week. I think we'll be back next week after more action. We've got some rivalry stuff next week, Iowa and Penn State. We'll talk about that and see what else kind of transpires. And as always, leave some comments, whether you want us to wrap this shit up quickly in 25 minutes, or if you're Slap the Mat and you want to nerd out a little bit in the comment section, have at it as well. But yeah, like, subscribe, all that fun YouTube shit, and we'll see you next week.